But anyways, getting right into it. Whatever your role is, I suspect most of you are, at least from what I understand, probably more on the design side. But whether you're a designer, or an engineer, or a product manager, or whatever you may be, um, it's probably safe to say that we're all playing some role in building a product. And maybe you're really proud of what you've built. Maybe your users are super engaged, and business leaders are happy. Maybe clients love you, etc. Or maybe you find yourself in a situation where many do, which is that something like this, like maybe where commitments already made and the roadmap is in motion, but you find yourself questioning the value of the product or its features. Or maybe everybody has a different idea of what the product should do, and there's no clear source of truth or path to resolution. Or maybe you have great insights about customer needs and business opportunities, but you're not sure how to translate them into features to build. So if you work long enough on products, you're probably going to face something like that. I imagine, most of you have probably been in those kind of situations. Product development is hard, even when you do it right. But have you ever thought about what makes the difference between a product that works and a product that doesn't? In my view, good and bad products don't happen randomly. And in my years of working on products, whether large or small, whether they're huge platforms with large user bases, or mobile and web apps, or entries into new markets, or maybe even a hardware product, I've found that really the way teams decide what to build is where things go wrong. So it's focus and features. In other words, the process breaks down when your team lacks a shared basis for deciding together what's most important. So there's no testable and public and mutually owned rationale for what you should build next and why. But I've also found that the way teams decide what to build is where things go right. That's one of the greatest opportunities, and I want to show you a way to do that. And the good news is that you really don't have to find a blank slate project or convince your team to start over or wait until you get a fancy enough title to make all the decisions. You can really start in the messy reality of where you are right now. So to show you a way to do that, we need to start at the beginning with the basic truth about product development. It's one of the most foundational ones, but it's also one of the hardest to swallow, which is this: that nobody cares about your product. Sorry, they really don't. What people care about is what your product enables them to do. It's not the product, it's the difference it makes in their lives. It's now you can fill in the blank. It's the thing that's now true in their life because of your product. So for users, that's the new reality that they'll pay for with money or something else of value, which no competitor has adequately provided. It's what the product experience delivers. And if you get that wrong, there's no business outcome either. If we miss this, we'll too easily ship stuff that nobody wants. So these are the results. The business, companies care about the opportunities your product unlocks. So on the flip side of this, these are the results that the business offering the product cares about. So reliable revenue, competitive advantages, cost savings, et cetera, many different ways for the business to succeed. And hopefully in a company that values social responsibility, a positive impact on society. So in other words, outcomes. So that's the why behind the products we build. It's not about the technology that we assemble or the features we deliver. It's about the outcomes we enable for our users and customers and the business. It's about the reality that becomes possible because of the product's presence. The product is just an enabler of those outcomes. It's a mediator of a value exchange between the users and the business. So let me visualize what I mean here. Any given product exists to produce an overall outcome in a user's or customer's life. So regardless of how, the outcome could be get to the airport faster, or it could be share photo moments with your friends or whatever. But we could call that the user outcome. The business is enabling this experience for the users because it produces a competitive advantage of some kind. So maybe it's subscription revenue, new market opportunity, data it can sell, operational cost savings, et cetera. And then the solution, the thing we design and engineer, like the photo sharing app or a health benefits explainer bot or a parking finder app, I mean, you name it, is the mediator of that exchange of value. So it's the flip side of the user need or the problem to be solved. And it's ultimately your team's best shot at ensuring those outcomes happen as completely and consistently as possible. The solution is crucial, but again, it's not really the point. It's the current best way we know of to make these outcomes happen for the users and the business. So by buying with dollars or something else of value and using the product, customers get an outcome to improve their lives in some way, and the business gets an outcome that improves the prosperity and strategic option and competitive positioning. So if the product as a solution exists to enable those outcomes, then we could think of it as a definable collection of smaller problems it has to solve for users or outcomes to produce. And you can visualize that like this. So as the market changes, or as we develop better technology, or when we come up with better ideas, we might change the solution in order to more effectively produce those customer and business outcomes that are, the real goal. And we can expand that to include additional levels of detail and branches, but you get the basic idea. This way of defining and visualizing products at its most basic is what I call outcome laddering. It might seem kind of abstract, so let's start with a real world example. Just to review real quick, an outcome laddering is a shared evolving snapshot of the outcomes the team believes a product must produce in order to meet customers' needs and yield sustainable business advantages visualized in enabling relationships. So I would imagine probably most of you have tried Waze before, the app. I'm choosing this one since it's pretty simple and most people are familiar with it. Just by show of hands, how many of you have used Waze? Yeah, I think basically everybody. If you haven't, it's social gamified navigation app where you can share road hazards and points of interest and stuff like that. Before Waze came along a little while ago, we had simple point A to B direction apps like Google Maps, MapQuest, etc. And then along came Waze with something new. It was multiplayer traffic management and the insights of the crowd and this gamified navigation experience. So we might be familiar with the app's features, but beneath the surface, there are a series of beliefs about the problems customers have that were not being adequately addressed by the market. And those beliefs are the reasons Waze built those features. So what problem are they solving for customers? While their team started with a set of beliefs and worked from there to features, we can work outside in from a purpose statement I heard from them once, which is fight traffic together. So why is that the outcome they're focused on? We can infer a need. Sitting in traffic is infuriating because it makes you feel alone and helpless. So they tapped into a powerful need, a desire to find company to be miserable with, to stick it to the man, to fight back. And they had a core insight about why traffic sucks. And they flipped it into an outcome and built a product around that. So this is one articulation of the essential value of this product. It's what you can now do because of it. So what is the business outcome or opportunity that meeting that need for customers produces? Probably something like licensing access to exclusive route activity data in a market where there's widespread need for traffic and navigation services, but not as much technical infrastructure to support it maybe. Maybe geo-targeted advertising opportunities. I'm kind of guessing here, but you get the idea. So if we go back to our board, I've captured some of these here. Now, if the outcome this app exists to produce is to enable people to fight traffic together, we might break it down into two branches: stuff you need in order to fight traffic and stuff you need in order to do it together. So first, to fight traffic, customers need to know what the best route is. For that, they need to be able to see and evaluate their options. And a way to do that is automatic route plotting and selection, which is a feature we can design and build. And second, you can think of it as what parts of the problem have to be solved to make this overall outcome happen. Second, they need to be able to anticipate and adapt to changing route conditions. And some ways to do that are traffic monitoring, notifications, and route adjustment, which again are features we can design and build. So you could summarize this outcome like that. So in the blue there, you see the outcomes. In the purple, it's potential business outcomes. And then the green is how we make it happen by the thing we ship. So to do it together, you need social conditions, social features rather, to be able to share route conditions like hazards and speed traps, etc. So remember, this is just an articulation of the team's latest or best ways to producing those outcomes. If you come up with a better way, you can change it. So then if we zoom out a little bit, we could keep breaking this down into kind of deeper levels of detail, but you get the basic idea. So if we think about scope, let's see what happens if we decide not to address this outcome, and then the ones that depend on it, of course. So if we're not going to address the outcome to help people feel less alone and help other drivers, what happens to our product? So, you could basically ask yourself, does the one above it still happen? I would say no. This is now just a navigation app with no differentiated value to offer customers. It's really no different than something like Google Maps or whatever. And Waze probably can't produce the overall product outcome without the branch, if you will, focused on helping other drivers. So what about gas prices? You can see that there in the bottom right. Does the app really need to address that to produce the outcome above it? Well, let's try. You get rid of that one. Do you still get the outcome of feeling less alone and helping other drivers? I think so. So you probably don't have to have that outcome down there on the bottom right. Potentially it strengthens the one above. It becomes an outcome that by meeting it, you have a stronger product, you more completely meet the need. And the outcome is more effective, but it's probably not essential. So it might be a useful thing to build, but it may not be core to the product's value. So it could help though. So if what remains are what we could call the essential outcomes, so minus the one with the dotted line, then we could understand this as our best shot at solutions to produce those outcomes. And this is what I ultimately call an essential value scope. It's basically a true 1.0. This wasn't hard to do, aside from forcing myself to ask tough questions and be very specific. It took about 30 minutes to put this one together. And basically I pulled language from their marketing website and inferred the rest from personal experience. I'm doing this from the outside, but you can do this for your own product. It's a very simplified example, but I just want to point out some of the key ingredients. You've got prioritized outcomes for customers. So remember, this is the result, not the means. You've got prioritized outcomes for the business. Again, result, not means. You've got a hierarchy of enabling relationship between outcomes. So in other words, to sufficiently address a given outcome, you need to be sure you address its essential components, so the ones that depend on it. And we've got your team's latest best solution proposal for producing the outcomes above. So regardless of development status, whether it's just an idea or something already in market. And then you have an articulation or definition of the essential value scope, showing the irreducible and interdependent outcomes to address in order to make a valuable product as agreed upon by the team. In other words, if you address fewer than those outcomes, customers won't want it and you can't compete. So this is outcome lettering. And I would propose that this is the hidden skeleton under every product experience. So behind every product, behind every feature, ultimately there's a definable set of beliefs, wherever they came from, and no matter how valid they are, but upon which delivery commitments are made. And so one big question we have at this point is this actually correct? So like, would the Waze team agree with this articulation of the product? Not necessarily. But let's say I'm joining the team, hypothetically, now those beliefs and proposals no longer just live in my brain or in the team's brain. They're articulated and visualized in enabling relationships. So we could debate them. We could assign confidence levels or evidence to these beliefs. We could align on them. We could make conscious product decisions based on what we actually believe. Or we can spot areas of conflict or where our thinking needs more work or where it's too vague or whatever. I would argue being clear is better than being correct because it will reveal the quality of your team's decision logic as it is today and where it may break down into disagreement or guesswork. So in other words, the whole point of this is to have a way to proactively confront the ambiguity in our projects and partnerships, to make the product decision logic visible, and find our strategic footing from any point in the process. It enables us to align our capabilities to strategy. It enables us to translate insights into testable beliefs, to rally your team around a product story, and to strengthen feature relationships. Ultimately, outcome laddering is about learning to identify and clarify and share product decision logic so that everyone can understand, no matter what part they play, why their work matters and how to optimize for the priorities and how to move together as a team. So understanding this as the logic beneath product definition has really changed the way I work. Like I said, I think it's the hidden skeleton of every product experience, and it's something that you can learn to see when you look at a product. It can give you the ability to orient yourself, to diagnose your team's problems and plot a path forward. I've used this before to map out entire product platforms and clarify the purpose of each part, like this one for a small business banking experience. I think that's what this one was. This one's obviously a lot more extensive. I did this in Airtable. You can use a number of different tools, but in Airtable, I put this one together so that I can attach other kinds of metadata to it. And I can say more about doing that in a bit. But this approach has really helped me and the teams I've worked with to refocus our work on the core workflows and user goals, rather than its prior orientation by project or by feature. It's helped us to avoid shipping the org chart. So rather than just shipping by which team is responsible, we're actually shipping against outcomes together, and illuminated new opportunities for how we might organize the platform's functionality. So things like information architecture redesign or navigation redesign, highlighting feature crossover, et cetera. So it's also just been a huge help in aligning with partners and creating a strategic story, even when it's just a tool I'm using for myself and my contributions with the team. With the language and structured thinking we got from doing this, so relying on research insights from the team and conversations with partners, serving as the backbone of the strategic framing we worked with our senior partners to create, this stuff also becomes part of the story told by leadership with the entire organization. You can, like I said, use this approach to attach other metadata, and some tools are better for that, like Airtable, but you can do this in BigJam or Miro or whatever tool you're comfortable with. But you can attach things like confidence levels for outcomes to address. So like, how sure are we that this is the right thing to do or the right problem to solve based on things like research evidence? Or maybe you could attach technical capabilities needed to deliver the solutions. So in order to ship this feature, we're going to need XYZ, APIs or whatever it may be. Risks maybe associated with delivering a certain outcome. And maybe coordination needed with the legal or risk team to get that done. Or maybe who's accountable for which outcomes, especially as teams or leaders are defining their work by the thing that becomes true in the world rather than just the thing they make. So I've created a cheat sheet to help you do this. It used to be called value mapping. I think that's what it still says on there, until I found out someone else used that name for something else. But this just has some prompts to help you start really anywhere in the process, from the feature level, from the very top level, from a solution, from an outcome, from a business mandate, wherever you are, you can start there, and there are prompts here that will help you move from there to fill out the rest of your kind of product scope. If this is something you're interested in learning more about, you can just search Peter Lewis outcome laddering. You should be able to find it. And I have a long form article there that goes into a lot more detail on this approach and tips for how to implement it. But like I said, I hope this is helpful to you, and happy to answer any questions that you may have. And this is where you can find me online.
Are you okay sticking around for some questions?
Yeah, sure.
Questions you'll have. I'll kick us off questions. So, Peter, you talked about testability of your assumptions, and how critical do you feel that testability is a piece of your outcome laddering process? Because there are sometimes assumptions that are incredibly difficult to get testable, repeatable, validated results for, and you know, how you sort of handle that with the structure that you had there.
Yeah. I would say the first goal of this approach is to make decision logic visible. So it's not necessarily to guarantee that the beliefs captured are correct. It's to show what they are, like what the actual basis for decisions really is, whether it's true or not, so that the team can begin to move together towards the same outcomes and to identify areas of weakness in the product definition. And so there are definitely times where a belief that it's based on is shaky, or it's really just an assumption, or maybe so and so powerful person said that this is why we're doing it. Either way, just starting there and making that explicit and visible and owned by everyone, I think is really, really crucial, so that you can figure out what to do next. And it will help reveal kind of like, is this a valid basis for the commitments that we're making to build XYZ features and capabilities and to ship this experience? You know, you can have those debates as a team, but until it's visible, it's really difficult to do that, I've found. And so things tend to be siloed, or the person with the biggest title wins, or you know, there's a bunch of different ways that these things kind of break down. But I would say that, again, like the first goal is to be clear rather than right, because then you can identify how confident you are about those beliefs and on what basis. And you can also decide as a team, you know, what basis is acceptable for us. So for some teams or some leaders, you know, there may need to be a pretty high bar of confidence with, you know, where you're working with researchers to do, let's say, concept testing that's a qualitative plus quantitative measure in some way of like the success or effectiveness of delivering against that outcome or whatever. Or maybe yeah, so there, I would say it's a couple of different things. I would also just add, I'm deliberately using the word beliefs rather than hypotheses or assumptions. And the reason for that is because hypothesis tends to kind of imply this kind of scientific precision that you don't always need when you're building a product, and you certainly don't always have. And then assumption tends to indicate that it's not based on anything sometimes. And so I like to use beliefs just because it's what the team is actually willing to make a commitment based on, regardless of what it is. And then really the big question is like, what is the basis for this belief? Where did it come from? How valid is it? And what do we need in order to make a commitment? Does that help?
Excellent. Thank you.
But yeah, in terms of like breaking something down into a testable area of focus, I feel like that's a bigger question for like that it gets into the research side of things of like how do you determine whether you're solving the right problem, and there are a bunch of methods in research for that that I'd be happy to share more about if that would be helpful. I would just say, sorry, one more thought. The bigger question it is, um, the like the higher up on the outcome ladder that you go, that is more about, are we solving the right problem, and should this thing exist, and would it be valuable if it did? And that is usually best demonstrated in generative research, in qualitative research, with some sort of um, uh, quantitative kind of validation of those emerging beliefs. If it's something like, if really the thing that you're trying to learn about is how effective is our solution, and therefore like how well are we meeting the outcome, then often like traditional user testing and a whole bunch of methods that go along with that is effective. So I hope that's helpful.
I'm in the back of the room, so hopefully you can hear me.
Yep.
All right. So first off, as a Capital One customer, I recognize the UI you showed on your early slides, and I will tell you that I do like both the mobile app and the website. So well done on that. And
Oh, thanks. It was a while ago, so it's probably changed somewhat.
okay, well, not too much. Pretty familiar. So I've got a couple questions. I'll save further ones so let other people ask theirs, but I'll start with this first one that may actually be a multi-part, which is the gist of the question is, what if you're not the person making decisions? So for me, I'm actually a project manager more on the technical side of things, and I work for an agency, so we have the business that is actually telling us what to make, but we still get to provide input about how the product should work and what it should be. So with a process like this, is this something where I can use this to help guide their thinking, or is there any risk of them thinking that I'm trying to kind of meddle in things that are outside of my area?
Sure. Yeah, some of that stuff can be tricky, and if you happen to be working with people who I'll just say are like territorial or whatever, obviously that is a difficult situation, and I don't know if one like framework will necessarily solve it. But I would say in general, what sorry, can you give me 1 second? Sorry, I have a kid banging on my door.
Good. I had a similar question in regards to like, I was about to say.
All right, I'm back.
Oh, I was adding while you were gone, I was like, I had a similar question in my head of like, do product managers hate this? Like, because, like it's basically reframing the way
Land grab.
It's a land grab. Yeah. So I was thinking about that in my head the whole time too, as well.
Yeah. I have not found that to be the case. I've found that when designers do this, or anyone does it, people seem to be really grateful. And I think the reason for that is that typically there are a lot of problems that come from just the unarticulated, unexamined assumptions or beliefs beneath product decisions and prioritization criteria. And so getting that out into the open where everyone can see it, even if it's like deferring to the beliefs of the person in charge or whatever, like at least it makes explicit, like it's essentially a synthesis tool. It starts that way, at least. Like it can be a great method of onboarding, of like interviewing the whole team and using that as this kind of synthesis moment to try to articulate like what the shared perspective of the team is about why the different parts of the product exist and what they're there to do and what it takes to build them. And I've done this working with product managers, engineering leaders, business leaders, and sometimes with that very much foregrounded for everyone to see, sometimes more to kind of inform my own thinking. And generally speaking, though, I would say the purpose of it is to get it out in front of everyone so that everybody can kind of contribute and understand their place and work on it together. So yeah, I just, in my experience, I haven't really seen it be perceived as like a land grab. I guess it might start to blur into some of the stuff that product managers are traditionally expected to do, but I have not found that most product managers do it. And I don't know what that means exactly. Maybe it's just places I've worked. But I would say it's always been helpful to kind of clarify the story of the product, if you will, and establish a shared basis or logic of, why does this product exist? Why does it have the features it has? And then how confident are we about this? Where do we need to shore it up? Where do we need to do some additional evidence? Or where are we just ready to make some conscious bets? Or we're just acknowledging that like maybe this belief isn't so valid, but we know why it's there. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think that as you were talking through that, it also led to some thoughts in my mind about, well, like you said, of me doing this shows kind of a service to them, helping the business out in other ways. And
Yeah, I love that word. I think service to them is a great way to put it, because I don't know if you've ever been in a meeting when like whoever is the person to, like, when a meeting is just going really long and going back and forth, and when someone stands up at the whiteboard and starts visualizing what the group is saying, usually there's just this like relief. And I don't know if you've observed that too, but it's sort of like that. Like, again, my hope is for it to be kind of a synthesis tool. It's not a claim of ownership. It's a like, I think what I'm hearing is this correct? And so often, like, what I've done is, like, as I'm putting it together, or I'll do it on the call with them, like, okay, I think this is what I'm hearing this product is about. Like, let's say I'm joining the team. Like, is that fair? Does that represent your point of view? And often people are kind of grateful for the prompt to really think it through. Or you discover, like, oh, we don't even know why we're building this thing. That's really good to know, you know?
I think the project manager is a really good person to do this activity, because then you get to talk to everybody and they to help with alignment. And again, like, it doesn't matter who gets up when you're thinking, you're just trying to visualize things to help get through a meeting. I think that is beneficial for everybody. So yeah, my opinions, I guess.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, I couldn't hear the last sentence you said. What was that?
Oh, I was just said that's my opinion, I guess.
Oh, yeah. No, I agree.
Peter, one of the things I love about the method that you showed is that it's focused on the customer value that you're driving, and it's really anchored on that. I'm curious if you run into, I mean, speaking of collaboration with product and business stakeholders, have you run into any tensions where folks really want to lead it from the business value side of that ladder, and where that kind of tension comes into play? And you found any especially helpful ways to navigate that balance?
If we're actually building something and it's driven by a business outcome, there's always something that at least is claimed to be a benefit for a customer. Like, it could be that it's a really shaky belief about like whether anyone's going to actually want this thing, but there's at least somebody who believes like the reason we're building it for people is because they have a hard time with X, and so we're giving them this thing. Otherwise, like, a product literally doesn't exist if there's not something of both. And so I think one of the ways that this approach can be a service and help build trust as you have those conversations and use it just as a tool for those conversations is to just demonstrate talking consistently about business outcomes and customer outcomes in the same conversation. Like very often designers just talk about customer outcomes. And when I say customer, I mean like anyone who uses the product with whom the business has a relationship. So that's another conversation, but I mean that pretty broadly. And then, business folks often just talk about the business outcomes. So when you are the one to show up and talk about both of those things and how they affect each other and what the interplay is and how they depend on each other, I have found that always seems well received. It shows like a concern for each part of the product that has to be successful for the product to work. So yeah, I think it's always good for everyone to be thinking about each of those components, and I think the more that we get fluent with talking about what has to be true for the business to succeed, what has to be true for the customer to succeed, and what capabilities do we need to build so that we can ship that and make it real in the world.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
Question here, this is maybe kind of more of a logistical question about the outcomes ladder. So we have a product that we're working on where the stakeholders have identified, here's the main four objectives that we want to reach, and the objectives, I could probably restate them as usage, cost savings, reduction in customer churn, and actually not sure how to generalize the fourth one, but there's basically four different objectives. So when we're creating a ladder, can we create that from each of our four different outcomes that we're trying to achieve, or should everything really flow from a single place?
I don't think it needs to flow from a single place. I think you should just start where you are with what you already know and feel confident about, or wherever's easiest to start, honestly. Like I haven't found that it really matters. The thing is to start the conversation and to start externalizing the beliefs, the basis for product decisions. So that might be with one of those business levers or outcomes there. And then working to, if you're starting with the business outcome, you can be asking, okay, what do we believe we need to do for customers so that this thing happens? And if that's the question, then now you're talking about the customer outcome. There are times where it's not always a one-to-one between, like every feature on its own won't necessarily have like a clear business results necessarily, because some parts of the product that matter for users exist to enable the whole experience, or to make it like a smooth, like the connective tissue between different parts of a product that there might be parts of the product that you have to build because it's sort of a baseline expectation, but it in itself doesn't produce like revenue for the business or whatever. But that nonetheless has to exist in order to have your differentiated feature that really drives the revenue or whatever. Hopefully that makes sense. So, but again, I would just start with what you have and just start asking what else do we need to do in order to make this happen? Or if this happens, what bigger thing happens? You can really start from wherever you are. And I mentioned in the cheat sheet thing there, I've got some questions to help do that from really any point in the process.
And I really like that last point you made about maybe features or functionality where you can't tie it to the outcome. And so one could say, well, I guess we shouldn't do those. But then on the other hand, if you don't do those, then you maybe just not have a product or you can't achieve something.
Yeah, well, that would become clear through, you would see some other outcomes not able to happen,
Okay.
you know, like, so you might have one, if you think of it in these branches, like you might have one here that you know for sure has to exist and it has a clear, you know, business outcome attached to it. But then in order to do that, you have to do like 3 smaller outcomes that maybe on their own don't have like an obvious, you know, like business priority attached to them, but they just have to exist to enable the experience that is differentiated.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's awesome. I feel like you just unlocked something for me.
Oh, cool. Awesome. Yeah, and another thing that I didn't say during the talk that I just wanted to make emphasize is my goal with this is not to kind of like trademark some new process that people have to follow and you know, have it go a very specific way. It's really about trying to install logic in how you think about products and what its ingredients are and how it works and why things get built. Because that can become kind of a superpower if you're able to see products that way. And it enables you to have conversations with anybody from the product and understand which, like, why everything matters or doesn't, or what questions are worth getting into about whether it does. And so that's where I don't really care that much, you know, whether exactly which tool anybody uses. There are some kind of core ingredients that I think are important, but just so that those things can become clear. It's not because I have any particular attachment to, you know, a process that anyone should follow. There are just some things that I found to be effective. But really, like I said, it's about internalizing kind of the logic of products and why they get built the way they do. To me, that is the value of it. And so the some suggested process can help with that. But you know, like I said, you can do this in Airtable or you know, Big Jam or Miro or whatever, or on a wall, you know, done with stickies and you know, a whiteboard or whatever. It really doesn't matter. The key thing is the logical, the interdependent relationships between outcomes and the definition of kind of the irreducible scope of what has to happen in order for it to be valuable. And then everything else just really flows from there. You can also do this with a role or with the purpose of a company. So like, this is actually how I track and define my annual goals now. So it's basically the same thing. It's just there are certain outcomes that matter to the organization, and there are outcomes that matter to me, and there are ultimately, like, I'm articulating it in terms of like things that if I'm successful will be true. So it's not like do this activity so much as it is make sure this thing happens, and if it does, then I'm successful. And then I've made that in PigJam. It looks very much like one of these outcome laddering things for products, and then shared it with my boss and with the last several bosses I've had. And that's been really helpful to just kind of align on that of like, this is just like, this is why a product exists. It's like, well, this is why my role exists, is to make these things true here. So again, it's just a logic. It's just a way of thinking. And from there, I think you can apply it in a number of different ways.
One more question. So generally, when we talk about like business outcomes, so how technical, like, should we like convey our position? Is it just like I'm gonna improve, like this is like a sales outcome or like something like that, or you go like in like the KPIs of it, like it's like very detailed. How do you convey like those business outcomes to the stakeholders?
I think it's because you're in the back, but the audio is cutting in and out. It's a little difficult to hear. Could you restate that?
So I was like talking about like the business outcomes that you mentioned in the outcome laddering. So when you talk about it, like, is it less like the, like the higher level of business outcomes, just talking about like sales or like the way we improve it, or you go like in depth with the technical constraints, like we talk about, these are the KPIs that we are tracking, or like, how do you convey those decisions to these stakeholders?
Yeah, I would, I don't think there's a right answer on that. I think it's whatever level of detail helps you make the decisions you need to make and align on what you need to align to make those decisions. So, if the key thing to keep track of with individual business outcomes is the KPIs associated with them, and you want to keep that in mind while you're looking at customer outcomes and technical capabilities, then by all means, you can attach that there. And some tools might help with that, like Airtable. I would say if it becomes too sort of heavy to easily use and update, then it's probably too much detail. Because again, it should be a living document. It should be a snapshot. Actually, I don't think I really emphasized this before, but I really want to emphasize it's just a snapshot of what your team believes right now. So it might not be 100% true. You're probably going to change it. And in fact, in many times when I've had, meetings with people or we're, shifting priorities or whatever, like just pulling it up and screen sharing and like, hey, this is what we've currently believed. Do we all align, that we're changing this, so I would say just whatever level of detail helps you keep it at a current snapshot of what you actually believe, and then whatever detail level helps you make the decisions you need to make. I've gone pretty crazy with it before in Airtable because you can attach insane amounts of metadata if you want to, and then you don't have to view it. So that I've created different views. Like there's just the top level view. Here's just the MVP or non MVP. I'm calling it EVS for essential value scope for a reason. This is the essential value scope. This is these are the differentiators. We have like a differentiator view. We might have like the one with all the metadata. You might have like the super simple one that you just use for slide decks when you're kind of figuring out your story. So I like tools like Airtable where you can kind of hide and show information depending on your use case. But right now the stuff I'm doing is just in FigJam because that's the current state of the conversation is like we just need to be directionally aligned on like generally speaking at a high level, are we need to make these business outcomes happen and we believe in these customer outcomes happening to make this a truly valuable and differentiated product in the world. So we're kind of keeping it at like a low level of detail for this particular one, but over time, probably add more detail. Hope that helps.
Question on that. So, all right, I know you said there's no specific process, but I'm curious in practice when you're coming up with your outcome and beliefs, how many customer conversations are you having around those? Or are you just locking yourself in a room and saying, this is what I think?
It's usually something that develops over time. And I've started just like capturing whatever I currently think, even if it's nothing but intuition. Like it's much better to have something to start with and then start evaluating like this one seems really vague. I need to get more clear. And I realize like I need more research to understand exactly what outcome actually matters here. So, or I haven't had conversations with the team yet. So I'll just put whatever my belief is, but I'll expect to update it after I talk with them. So again, it's just a snapshot of whatever you currently believe about why the product is structured the way it is, or what you plan to do with it. Because you can do this before you've built anything. You could do this at the very beginning of a research project, and you could just like write down all your hunches and how they relate to each other. So again, it's not assuming validation up front. You can get to that later once you've prioritized areas that need to be true for it to succeed. You can, prioritize like this has to be tested based on XYZ criteria or whatever. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, yes, that makes sense. That tracks with the snapshot idea that you mentioned. But when you're coming
Yeah, and
up,
I would just
very,
go ahead.
well, I guess as you're coming up then with that snapshot, like how clear, I'm curious just about your process. Like, do you find yourself throwing a lot of them on a whiteboard and then you're kind of like, that's the one, or are you kind of immediately drilled in on like, this is my belief and I'm sticking?
Yeah. I've gotten to where I sort of do it intuitively, so I'm trying to think in terms of process. I know that like some of the specific prompts that I started with are in that cheat sheet thing, so that would be worth taking a look at. I can maybe Justin, you might be able to send out the link to that afterward. I'm not sure what y'all can do, but anyways, I just start with like, what do I currently think? And what do I currently know about? Like I've heard this capability has to exist. Why is that? I think it's because we have this business thing that has to happen. And I think that if I took a guess, that means that this outcome is probably what we're going for with customers. And therefore, like, is the value proposition. You can also think of the outcomes as like, they're not necessarily the same as marketing messages, but they often actually work really well. So like, actually, here's another thing I've done with this is basically just take an outcome ladder and make a marketing like landing page from it. And it works great if you have taken the time to really articulate those in a compelling way. Then it's basically the architecture of a landing page. Like the top one is the headline, the next one down is the section header, the feature, headlines are basically those outcomes. So again, it's like now you can what? That's the value proposition. So another way to think of outcomes for customers is value proposition. But I would say I want to make sure I'm answering your question. I lost my train of thought. I wanted to make sure I brought in that one point, so then I sidetracked myself. Remind me of the question again.
It was about your process, whether you're just intuiting this and you're sticking to your guns on that one, or if you're throwing.
Oh. Yeah, I mean, I would just say like force yourself to be super specific. So like don't allow ambiguity, and that will quickly either show you like, oh wow, we don't know enough, we need to go learn, and that informs the research agenda, or it will show you like yeah, I mean it's really the more you can force yourself to be specific, the more you will kind of reveal the quality of your current thinking, basically. And so that's what I try to do is I just try to ask myself like, what do I know and believe about this product right now, and how do those things relate to each other, and just not allow myself to get away with saying something vague like what's a good example? I can't think of an example right now, but what?
Help users navigate.
Right. It's like that's nobody's actual goal. It's like the thing that they're after, like why are they navigating? What are they there to do? Like those things are the outcomes.
Awesome. Well, please join me in thanking Peter one more time.
Well, thanks for listening, everyone. Appreciate it. I hope this was helpful to you. If there's any, I like to learn through feedback. And so if there's anything that was particularly helpful that I should do more of, I would love to hear that. If there's anything that wasn't helpful or was confusing, I'd love to change that. So, if you all are able to reach out on, I think my website has an email link. It's under construction right now. I'm about to launch a new version of it, but you can also find me on Twitter, which I will always call Twitter, or on LinkedIn, that last one there. So I'd love to hear from you, and maybe I could help out or answer questions or whatever. Learn from you.
Awesome. Yeah, Peter, if it's okay with you, I'll include your contact links here, along with the toolkit and the article link in the email out to everyone that is here today.
That sounds great. Well, I really appreciate being with you all. Seems like an awesome crew, and I really appreciate everyone's time and attention.
Awesome. Thanks again, Peter.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.